If you ever come across a children's show called Jolly Roger, do not let your kids watch it. My 8-year-old son Ethan is one of those kids that is very hard to keep entertained and to keep occupied. Usually after school, he will beg me to watch some TV, and so I let him watch it for an hour, but after around 10 minutes in front of the television, he is already bored. He then will move on to coloring in some other form of arts and crafts, and it will sometimes keep him occupied for an hour or two. This was the standard after school routine that was in place with Ethan. Well, that was until we discovered Jolly Roger. We first discovered the television show Jolly Roger when I was scrolling through a popular kids streaming service. We had already scrolled through many different kids shows, all of which Ethan wasn't interested in, but when the small image and the big red writing that read Jolly Roger showed up on the screen, Ethan immediately said he wanted to watch that show. In my opinion, it looked like it might have been aimed at kids a bit younger than Ethan, but when I suggested that he chooses another show, he furiously stomped his foot and insisted that that was the show he wanted to watch. I did have some work that I needed to do that day, but I decided that I would watch the first episode with him, just to make sure that it was okay for him to watch. I was fairly certain that it would be, as it was under the kids category on the streaming service, but I guess I am just a bit of an overprotective parent. So, we both sat next to each other on the couch and began to watch the first episode of Jolly Roger. A loud and happy song filled with trumpets and drums started playing as a man walked out onto the screen. He came from inside a large pirate ship, which I guess is where the show got its name, and he walked up close to the camera as the words Jolly Roger flashed up on the screen. This man wore a long-sleeved purple shirt and black denim jeans, and he had short and medium-length curly black hair that looked like little pieces of spiral pasta that emerged from his head. The thing that I noticed most about this man though was not his funny-looking hair, it was his smile. It was possibly the biggest grin that I have ever seen on anybody before. His lips were open wide, revealing perfectly straight, white teeth underneath. The corner of his lips was almost up level with his nose, and it almost looked like his lips were being pulled back in order to smile as wide as he was. This man then began to talk. "Hello kids, how are we all today? I hope we are all happy. He said in an overly excited and over-the-top voice. "My name is Jolly Roger and I hope that we can all have a good time day. We will be singing, we will be dancing, and of course, we will be having fun." At this point, it seemed like the show was definitely going to be appropriate for Ethan. He was probably getting too old for this type of show. I did continue to watch the episode, and it continued pretty much how you would expect. Jolly Roger pulled out a guitar and sang some nursery rhymes, then he began teaching some dance, and then he moved into the arts and crafts portion of the show. In this episode, he was teaching the kids how to make a small pencil holder that the kids could take to school. Once the pencil holder had been built, using an old toilet roll and some stickers, Jolly Roger then said that it was time for him to go. "My time with you is now at an end," he told the viewer, his large smile still present. "But before I do, we can't forget to sing the Jolly Roger song." Jolly Roger then began to sing a short song. "Every day is happy, so don't be a grin dodger. So, smile big and smile wide, just like Jolly Roger," he sang while waving to the camera. Jolly Roger was right though. He did smile big, and he did smile wide. That was one thing that didn't change throughout the whole episode. He never once stopped smiling. That big, wide smile never disappeared from his face. Once the episode was finished, I decided that it would be safe for me to leave Ethan alone to continue watching Jolly Roger. I had some work to do, and Ethan seemed more than happy, sitting there watching the show. Which I guess was strange. He normally would just sit there and watch more than one episode of show before he grew tired of it and found something else to do. But there he was sitting perfectly still on the couch, as glued to the television. This was a good thing, I thought. It meant he was entertained and would allow me to get a few moments of peace to get on with work. I got up from the lounge and told Ethan I was heading to the kitchen, but he didn't respond to me. He was just focused on one thing. The television. I didn't think too much of it and left the lounge room and headed out to the kitchen and began to do some work. I guess I lost track of time because, before I knew it, 2 hours had passed. I hadn't heard a peep out of Ethan, which was unusual, so I guess I got distracted by my work and had forgotten to check on him. I got up from the seat in the kitchen and went back out to the lounge room and found Ethan. He was still sitting in the same spot where I left him, his eyes still transfixed on the TV. I went and grabbed the remote and paused the show and told him that it was time for dinner and that he would have to watch more of it tomorrow. He didn't protest or get mad. Instead, he just said okay, got up from the lounge, and headed to the kitchen. As he was leaving the room, I glanced at the TV and saw that he was already on to episode 6, which is much more than you will usually watch in one sitting. We ate dinner together like normal, and then I spent the rest of the night helping Ethan with his homework. It was a pretty normal night. Everything seemed to be fine until it was Ethan's bedtime. I sent him to brush his teeth, even though he claimed he didn't need to and that his teeth were fine. And while he was brushing in the bathroom, I went into his room to get his bed ready for him. I needed to tuck his quilt under his bed, and so I bent down to tuck it in. As I bent down, I noticed something sticking out from underneath his bed. It was only jutting out just an inch, so I couldn't quite make out what it was. I reached out and grabbed it and pulled it out from under the bed. It was only small, and it was quite light, and it took me a second to realize what exactly it was. It was a small toilet roll, but over the top of it was a thin layer of tissue paper, which was blocking one end. I felt something rattle inside, and so I looked down into it. Inside, there was one single tooth. It was only a small tooth, and so I knew that it probably belonged to Ethan. At this point, I heard some footsteps behind me, and so I turned around and saw Ethan standing at the doorway, one hand behind his back. "You didn't tell me that you lost another baby tooth. When did you lose that?" I asked him. "Only today," he replied. "I pulled it out myself." "What do you mean you pulled it out yourself?" I asked him, growing concerned as to why he would pull his tooth out and place it into a toilet roll. Ethan looked at me for a second before replying. "Because Jolly Roger told me to. He told me that the magic wouldn't work if I didn't do it. It was a part of his arts and crafts. He told me that I needed one of my teeth and that I also needed some of your blood." "Some of my blood?" Before I could finish my sentence, Ethan suddenly stepped towards me and pulled his hand out from behind his back. In his hand he was holding one of my razor blades. I don't even know how he managed to get it. I always keep them out of reach, but I guess it didn't matter now because he was holding one and he was walking towards me. I dropped the toilet roll holder and reached out my arm to grab the blade off of my son. He then swung his arm towards my hand, and I felt the pain sear through my index finger. The razor blade had left a long, narrow cut along the top of my fingertip. Blood began to emerge from the wound. Ethan then quickly bent down, picked up the toilet roll holder that I had dropped and placed it on top of my finger. I quickly pulled the toilet roll off of my finger, in disbelief as to what had just happened. Ethan then reached out his hand that was holding the razor blade, like he was giving it back to me. I snatched it off of him and began to berate him. Maybe I was way too harsh on him, but I gave him a strong and probably quite loud talking to. He seemed upset, like he was remorseful for what he had done. I then put him into his bed and left the room, grabbing the toilet roll holder that now contained Ethan's tooth and was smeared in my blood. I went out of Ethan's room, slamming the door behind me. Something he said was beginning to worry me though. Jolly Roger told me too. I didn't know what this meant, but I knew that there was a way of finding out. I spent the next couple of hours watching through the episodes of Jolly Roger. Everything I watched though seemed normal. It was a lot of singing and dancing, and through the arts and crafts section, he only ever made innocent little crafts, as you would normally see on kids shows. There was no mention of teeth or drops of your parents' blood. I didn't know where he got all of that from because it wasn't in any of the episodes I had just watched. I was just finishing watching episode 6 and I could hear Jolly Roger singing, like he always did, smile big and smile wide, just like Jolly Roger, he sang, his big smile flashing towards the camera. Just as he sang the words "common just like Jolly Roger," that's when I felt it. I distinctly remember the feeling of 2 fingers, one on each side of my mouth, forcing their way inside of my mouth and then pulling upwards. I felt these fingers inside of my mouth, pulling my lips, forming a large, unwanted grin. I didn't know what it was, and when I felt around my mouth, I couldn't feel anything, but I knew that there was something there, forcing me to smile. That was 3 days ago now, and I can still feel the never-ending smile on my face. I can feel the fingers forcing my face into a large, painful smile. I now think back to the old saying, smiles are contagious, but this is one smile that I do not wish to pass on to anybody. So, now I am cautious of anyone I see smiling. Maybe they are just happy, or maybe their kid also watched an episode of Jolly Roger. I found an old childhood photo. There's something wrong with it. I found it while cleaning out the closet. An old photo, creased at the corners. It depicted a little boy sitting on a chair in the middle of a wallpapered kitchen. Blue eyes, blonde hair. I flipped it over and checked the date on the back. November 14th, 1996. So me, when I was 4. Except, the kid didn't look quite like me. The photo was grainy, so it was hard to tell for sure. But the eyes were a little too wide set. The smile was too toothy. So, a friend? But it was my mom's kitchen. Floral wallpaper with pink rosettes, the old oak table. And the kid so closely resembled me. Wouldn't I remember having a friend that looked like he could be my twin brother? And why isn't it with the other family photos? I found it in Mom's closet. She had several photo books, all populated with childhood photos, documenting the most insignificant events, from baking cookies to baseball games. So why wasn't this photo with the rest? Why was it hiding on the top shelf of my mom's closet, tucked under a hat box? I walked out into the family room and grabbed the photo album labeled 1995 to 1998. Paged through it until I got to a good, clear photo of myself at 4. Then I pulled the photo from my pocket and compared the two. It wasn't a great comparison. My head was tilted to the side, and his was straight. I was wearing a hat, but he wasn't. Still, the difference was unmistakable. His grin was wider, toothier. His skin was paler. His eyes were wider set. Yet, the differences were subtle. To anyone but me, they probably looked like the same person. What are you doing? I turned to see my mom, standing in the doorway, carrying a large box. I hesitated, wondering if I should bring it up to her. She had enough on her mind, with my stepdad passing away and the big move. I found this photo. Who is that? She set the box down and walked over. That's you. When you were 4 or 5. She smiled. Aw, how sweet. Look at you. But it doesn't. I hesitated again, knowing I would sound crazy. It doesn't, look exactly like me, does it? Yeah, you were a goofy looking kid, she laughed. You got a lot better looking as you aged. No, I mean, that photo doesn't look like I did when I was a kid. Look, see. I held up the photo of me in the Red Sox cap side by side with the photo of the boy in the kitchen. I think they look identical, she said. No, they don't. Maybe it's the hat. Hey, can you help me in the attic? There's a lot of stuff up there. Sure. I'll be there in a second. She smiled at me and turned away. I listened to her bare footsteps recede on the carpet. Then I snapped the photo album shut and put it back. I tucked the photo in my pocket. Then I walked back into my mom's room and opened the closet. There were more. When I took down the hat box to search under it, the top came off revealing an entire trove of photographs. I picked up a few of them and my heart dropped. A kid hunched over a birthday cake with 4 candles, smiling. Me. Except, not me. The same toothy grin, the same wide-set blue eyes. A kid standing in the front yard, pointing to a frog. My front yard. Again, not me. And then there was a photo that made my heart stop. A photo of my bed. I still remember those covers, with the sports cars on them. The pillow with the wheel on it. The car lamp. But there, sitting on the bed. Not one little boy. 2. Adam? My mom's voice came from above. I stared at the photo, frozen. Me. Sitting next to a little boy that looked almost exactly like me. A twin? A brother? I had no memory of this kid. All my life, I believed I was an only child. Adam. The stack of photos was a few inches thick. There was no way I could go through them all. I slipped several in my pocket, replaced the hat box, and then headed down the hall. Coming, Mom. I started up the ladder. And my phone began to ring. The theme of Legend of Zelda played its tune. I stopped 2 stairs up and slipped the phone out of my pocket. Caller ID, Ali. My wife. Yeah? Can you get me a drink, too? Sure, I said. What do you want me to pick up on the way back? The usual whiskey? On the way back? Yeah, on the way back from my mom's. I'll be here another hour or two, but... You're at your mom's? She asked. Her voice suddenly soft, confused. Yeah, why? I don't understand. I just let you inside the house, she said. You're down in the kitchen. Making our drinks, aren't you? The phone slipped from my hands. I stumbled down and snatched it up. My heart pounded in my ears. Ali, that's not me. I think I have a twin. You need to lock the doors. A twin? Adam, that's... Ali? His voice. It sounded just like mine. Yet, there was something off about it, something I couldn't quite place. Like listening to a slightly out-of-tune piano. Lock the door, I shouted into the phone. A heartbeat of silence. Then hurried footfalls as she ran over to the door. Click. You locked it? I asked, weakly. I did. Her voice was trembling. I crumpled against the wall, relief flooding me. I'm going to call the police, okay? But if you can get out the window, or something. Adam. My mom shouted down from the attic. Are you coming up, anytime this year? Just a second, I shouted back. Okay, she said, skeptically. I pressed myself into the closet. Must filled my nose as I pulled the doors shut in front of me, pressing me in. Ali? Are you still there? Are you okay? I whispered. I'm trying to get out the window, she whispered back. It's a long drop, but... Muffled knocking sounds, through the speakers. Ali? I heard him call. I shuddered. Hearing him say my wife's name made my skin crawl. I'm calling the police. Do anything you can to stay away from him. I disconnected the call and dialed the police. When I was assured they'd send someone over, I took a deep breath and opened the closet door. And froze. Mom was standing right outside. Whom were you talking to? She demanded. I stepped back, rustling against a row of sweaters. Fear swept through me, but then curiosity, anger, took over. I have a twin brother. Her eyes widened. Then her face crumpled, and she closed her eyes. I never. How did you? He's at my house. Right now. I pushed past her. He's with Ali? She clapped a hand over her mouth. That told me all I needed to know. You need to call the police, she called after me. I did, I shouted back, as I ran down the stairs. I pulled the phone out of my pocket and dialed Ali's number again. 5 rings then went right to voicemail. I ran into the driveway. Yanked open the front door, dove inside. Mom got in the passenger seat. Mom. I know him better than anyone, she said, not looking at me. The engine rumbled to life underneath us. I screeched out onto the road. A few minutes of silence passed between us. Then she spoke. I did it for your safety. I scoffed. For my safety? Yeah, right. And now my wife is at the hands of a psychopath. I swung onto the highway, pushing my foot on the accelerator. Why did you do it? Why did you really tell me all my life that I was an only child? Because you are. Mom. I only gave birth to one little boy. She took in a shuddering breath, then let it out. He showed up on our doorstep one day. Nowhere to go. Your father, being religious and all, wanted to take him in. He said the poor little boy got lost in the woods, and it was our duty to care for him until his family was found. So we adopted him. That doesn't even make sense. Let me finish, she snapped, with sudden anger. We contacted the police, everyone, trying to locate his family. All our searches turned up empty. It was like he'd just popped out of thin air. In my peripheral vision, I could see her turn to me, her expression grim. And that day, we took him in. I swear he didn't look a thing like you. I don't understand. The change was so gradual, it was hard to notice. In the span of a year, his hair had gone from brown to blonde. His face had gone from gaunt and pointed to round and full. Whenever I brought it up with your dad, he was always belligerent about it. He's been playing in the sun a lot. He was so skinny when he got here. He's gained weight, of course, that's going to make his face look different. A drizzle started, flecking the windshield with bits of rain. I turned on the wipers, they squeaked against the glass. Then your dad started saying things that didn't make any sense. Like, one time I ordered a big meal at a restaurant. He laughed and said, "Are you eating for 3 again?" And he'd say here and there when you were pregnant with the twins. It was like he truly believed Alaric was our genetic son. With a shaking hand, I clicked on my turn signal and veered towards the exit. Why don't I remember him? Was there some sort of traumatic event? Or, you still don't remember the day your father died, do you? No. He fell down the stairs, didn't he? I'd left you and Alaric with him while I went to the grocery store. When I came back, her voice cracked with emotion. You were crying. You didn't remember anything. Alaric, on the other hand, well, was acting like an angel, like he always did. But he had this smile on his face. She let out a breath. It was at that moment I knew that he had something to do with it. I put him up for adoption, and tried my best to erase him from our lives. Her words hung heavy in the silence. She pulled out her phone, tapped at it, then frowned. Ollie's still not picking up. Doesn't matter. We'll be there in a minute, I said, dread sinking in my gut. I swung onto our street. As the houses flashed by, my heart pounded faster. Ollie, please be okay. The little blue colonial came into view, with the hydrangeas and 2 little garden gnomes. I pulled into the driveway and halted to a stop. Pushed open the doors and ran inside. Ollie? I yelled. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Ollie. I screamed. I raced up the stairs, Mom running behind me. Turned the corner. The door to our bedroom was wide open. No. Shards of glass littered the floor. A puddle of whiskey stained the carpet. The window was open, curtains fluttering in the breeze. But the room was empty.
My son's camera monitor alerted in the middle of the night. I checked it and saw my wife and son sitting on the bed. They weren't my wife and son. I'm a nurse, and I currently work nights. It's a total drag, but I'm hopeful I can go to days soon since some co-workers are planning retirements. Anyway, I was working one night when just after 3 a.m., my son's monitor alerted me to sound and movement. No big deal at all. He probably coughed loudly or sneezed or something. He's 3 now, so he generally sleeps all night. I bring it up on my phone and I see him and my wife sitting on the bed. Again, no big deal. He might have cried out or gotten scared or something. I was about to close the app when I noticed they were acting strange, almost creepy. And when I say almost creepy, I mean creepy as balls. They were sitting on the bed together, both of them, just staring up at the camera with blank, emotionless stares. The night vision is black and white, so they had white, eerie-looking eyes. They didn't move at all aside from their visible breathing. They just sat there staring at the camera. I close the app and give my wife a call to make sure everything is okay. I never get to call home on lunch, so in a way this is kind of nice to get to talk to my family while at work. It rings a couple times before she answers with a very groggy, "Hello?" It was like she was dead asleep when I called and she looked wide awake when on the camera. "Hey, you guys okay?" "Huh? Yeah, Buddy," my son's nickname, came in like 15 minutes ago. Seemed scared, so I said he could sleep with Mama. I'm confused here since I saw them in his room a minute ago. Literally 60 seconds had passed since I closed the app and made the call. "Wait, so you guys are in bed?" "Yeah, I fell back asleep right away. Everything okay? Everybody keeps waking me up." She's kind of annoyed. "Hang on a sec." I put her on speaker and bring up the app, hoping I don't see it. When the app loads, I get that pang of intense nervousness in my stomach that I haven't had in a long time, since I was a kid in school and realized while I was eating breakfast a paper or something was due that day and I hadn't done it. My heart leaps into my throat. My wife and son are sitting on his bed looking up at the camera, same emotionless stares. "Hello? You guys are in bed, right?" "Yeah, we're trying to sleep." "Well, I'm looking at his camera and I see you two sitting on his bed." "Huh? No, we're in our bed." "I know that's what you mean, but I'm looking at his bed and you two are in there." "Hang on," she says. She's quiet for a sec while she brings up the camera on her phone. I hear this guttural, terrified gasp, like she had sucked all the air in the room into her lungs, filling them to capacity. I don't hear this kind of gasp from my wife often, usually only when she's truly afraid, like during a jump scare in a movie, or one time when we turned her back on our son for literally a second, and he was down by the mailbox inches from the road. I hear rustling of sheets and the line goes dead. Of course, now I'm absolutely terrified myself, so I immediately call back. It goes to voicemail, so I call again. I call again and again with no answer. Finally, after about 4 minutes, she calls me. I tell you that 4 minutes felt like 40 years. "Hey, what's happening?" I ask. She's absolutely hysterical and crying. I can't understand a word she says. "Stop. Slow down for just a second," I say. She slows down enough to explain they are in the car and driving to her parents. She looked at the camera, and when she saw what was on it, she got up and grabbed our son and rushed downstairs and out the door. Didn't even close the garage. "Don't worry about it," I said. "I'll drive by when I get off and close it." We live in a generally safe neighborhood, so I'm not too concerned the door is up. "You will not go in there," she says. "Hell no," I return. "Why are we on the camera?" she asked. "Is it a recording?" "I don't know," I return. "I'm gonna keep watching it and see if there's anything I can tell. Do our code words with Buddy." We have code words because we're nerds. We've seen too many pod people and imposter movies, so we decided a long time ago to make code words with each other to be able to tell if one of us was an imposter. We have a couple code words, but we also have a 3-sentence story we recite together, each saying a different part alternately of each other. I hear her on the phone saying the things we taught our son. He giggles as he says them. He does every time we practice, since he thinks they're a joke and doesn't have any idea of the real meaning. We're both convinced he's our son. My wife then says our part, and I'm convinced she's her. We made up these words as a complete joke to ourselves. I never once in my life ever imagined we'd actually need them. Unreal. She got to her parents safely, and it was hard to hang up. I told her we'll figure it out in the morning, hopefully just a glitch. She said she didn't think it was a glitch. When she was running out, she had to run by our son's room and the door was open. There's a little flashing light on the back of the camera that indicates it's connected to the internet. It gives off just enough light that when she ran by, she thought she saw, out of the corner of her eye, a shadowy outline of what could have been an adult sitting on our son's bed. It sends chills down my spine to think about. Knowing they were safe and out of the house is the only thing that kept me at work that night. It was a long 4 hours, but I kept checking the camera every chance I got. Sure enough, they were still sitting on the bed staring up at the camera with emotionless gazes. I studied them to see if I could see any pattern, from their breathing to their blinking. Their breathing was steady and looked normal. It was their blinking that would tell me if this was just some kind of bizarre, time-looped freak accident video or not. I intently stare at my phone and count the seconds between each blink, telling myself if this is a loop, then their blinks should be even and occur at the same time each time. There was no pattern to their blinking. It was erratic and random, just as a person blinking should be. The passing hours are what finally sealed the deal that this was not a weird looped video of some kind. My son's window is visible on camera, and I can see on camera that it is getting lighter outside his room. His curtains keep out just enough light to prevent the camera from exiting night vision, but lets in just enough to be able to tell the sun is rising. I try to figure out what the hell I'm going to do before I leave work. Calling the police comes to mind, but I talk myself out of it. First of all, what am I supposed to say? Someone is in my house that looks like my wife, but isn't. Worse yet, what if they are asterisk entities of some kind, and the police do go over and it kills them or something? I decide to tell coworker about it. He's a firm believer in the paranormal and might have a suggestion. I show him the video and tell him the story. His initial response of "that's creepy as fuck" doesn't help much, but he says he wants to go over and check it out. He says we both should to see if not my wife will try and act like my wife. I tell him absolutely not, and he says we should at least go to the house even if we don't go in. I agree on that since I wanted to close the garage. We got to my house and walked around the perimeter first. Not sure what we wanted to accomplish by that, but it felt like something we should do. The curtains were all drawn since nobody was there to open them in the morning, so we couldn't see anything. I went to close the garage and suddenly had this overwhelming urge to go inside and investigate. It was like I just had to know what was going on. So in we went. We walked through the kitchen towards the foyer where the stairs are. It's so quiet in our house right now you could hear a feather drop, forget the pin. We stop at the bottom of the stairs and wait a few seconds. I look at the camera again and they are still sitting there. I've never been so scared in my life. My coworker puts his foot on the first step and I suddenly say, "Stop," loudly. "Forget this, we're out of here," I tell him. "Come on." I start making my way back to the kitchen. We hear a loud creak in the floor from upstairs. It's my son's room. He has a very loud, creaky board right in the middle of his floor that's almost impossible not to step on. My wife and are still deciding if we ever want to fix it because it will alert us if he's ever up to no good when he gets older trying to sneak out or something. "Come on, come on, come on," I yell as I motion for him to move his ass. We're out of the house in about 2 seconds. Out on the street, I check my phone. Now only not my son was sitting on the bed. Same blank stare. Not my wife was gone. "Holy shit," my coworker says. "That was stupid as fuck of us. Do not tell my wife we went inside. She would be so ungodly mad if she found out what we just did." I use my garage door opener in my car to close the door. Before we leave, I look at the camera again. Not my wife is back on the bed with not my son, both staring blankly up at the camera, blinking every few seconds. That was all about 4 days ago now. Not my wife and not my son are still sitting on the bed staring up at the camera. They haven't moved a millimeter. We obviously haven't gone back to our house. What do we do?
Trust Your Gut Feeling Part 95. I lived in South Africa, where home invasions were pretty brittle. I grew up on a plot and lived in the flat adjacent to the main house. One night I woke up randomly around 2 a.m. and had this horrifying feeling that something wasn't right. I opened my flat door to look outside and to see if anything was going on. The feeling didn't go away, so I decided to get dressed and do a walk around the garden. Before leaving my flat, something told me to peep through the door, and as I did, I saw some guy walking in the garden. I then phoned my sister who lived in the house, but no answer. I then phoned my stepmom, but no answer. After a while my sister answered, which was really strange. I told my sister to wake the F up and walk around the house and make sure the doors and windows were closed as there was someone in the garden. She kept trying to blow it off and even said she'd unlock the house door so I could go inside the house. I told her that's a stupid idea and I wasn't going outside because I had nothing to protect myself with. My sister missed a breath during our call, something that usually happens when she's frightened. So out of instinct I asked her if everything was alright. She should say yes twice, but she only said it once. Turns out a group of men had already made it in the house and they had a gun to her head telling her to convince me to leave my flat. A few seconds later the automatic light outside my flat turned on. I then told my sister it's okay and I was going to sleep. I then phoned the police and neighborhood watch, which took the longest 30 minutes of my life to show up. Once I saw the police lights outside, I made a 100 meters dash to the gate to open it up for them. I then talked them over what happened and that we should investigate the house. I walked around the perimeter with them until we found where the guys had entered. We entered the house, which was totally trashed, until we got to the main room where there was a blanket over the bed. I took off the blanket and found my whole family under there, tied up, frightened and shirtless. This included my 1-year-old niece. If it weren't for my instincts, they would not have hesitated to kill me and probably do worse to my family. They already poisoned my dogs. Must have been a guardian angel or something looking over my shoulder that night.
I'm a former police officer. It's time to share the most disturbing case I've handled. I'm going to share a few stories with you. One by one though, because if I was overwhelmed by them, I have a feeling you will be too. I'm Officer Bradley. I retired from the force 10 years ago at the ripe age of 50. I'll begin with a story from my 20 years as a police officer that stuck with me like a deep thorn. January 17, 2005, we got a call about a woman who had locked herself in her bathroom. She said her boyfriend was trying to kill her. My partner Mason and I arrived at a house on the end of a street. The lamp posts flickered yellow and the wind danced the trees and bushes. The clouds were thick and the air ice cold. We took position at the front door. We knocked. Police, open up. Only the sound of wind chimes. Mason kicked the door open with all the force he could muster. We scanned the house downstairs. No one in sight. Clear. You hear that? I said. Mason looked up at the stairs. Gentle cries, a woman, so subtle, and as if muffled behind the door, in a room. Thought she was supposed to be downstairs, said Mason. We made our way upstairs. Ma'am, it's okay, I began. You're safe now, no one's going to hurt you. The crying stopped abruptly as if someone hit pause, then it started again. But he's still here, replied the woman from inside the bedroom. My partner and I checked the entire house. No one's here, ma'am, you're safe. Downstairs, the front door slammed shut. My partner and I gave each other a gaze and I could notice his brow sweating despite the cold night. I used my head to gesture for him to take a look. He stood from atop the stairs and looked down at the front door. Just the wind, I think, he said. Then a gentle voice came from inside the bathroom. Are you sure, Officer Bradley? The woman asked. The entire night at that scene, neither my partner Mason nor I used our names out loud, not once. Ma'am, do you need help or not? Mason was agitated. We need to know you're okay, so step back because I'm kicking it in. A part of me believes Mason was more eager to see the woman's face, to find out who she was and how she knew what she did, than he was for her safety. He wanted peace of mind. No, hold on, I said. She might be sitting right by the door. We don't want to hurt her. Then she said it. Officer Bradley, tell Mason that if he touches this door, I will visit his family in the late hours of a certain night and break down a door of my own. The woman's voice was an octave deeper when she said that. I never understood the expression, white as a ghost. Do people actually turn that pale in the face? I learned that they in fact did when I saw my partner react to those sinister words. I couldn't stop him from kicking in that bedroom door this time. But when he did, we found nobody inside. There wasn't a window above the shower through which to escape or another door to go through, and yet, we were certain that we just had a full conversation with a woman behind this door. We scanned the entire house, including the backyard, one last time, inch by inch, nothing. My partner and I communicated non-verbally the rest of the night, so when it was time to leave, we gave each other a look and left the house without even looking back. Now, this is the part of the story I haven't told anyone, not even Mason. We were sufficiently disturbed so I didn't want to tell him what I'm about to tell you. When we left the house, I drove us back to the station that night. He probably thought I didn't notice, but his hands were shaking too much to drive comfortably. He doesn't drink coffee. As I reversed the cruiser out the street, Mason didn't look back at the house. But the truth is, I did, and I sincerely wish that I hadn't. My eyes squinted through the thick darkness between me and the garbage can at the side of the house to see a black figure kneeling by the gate, as if watching us leave. And as we finally began to drive away, as the house became more and more distant in the rearview mirror, the figure slowly stood itself up, and, I'll swear even today, that as it stood up, its head peeked over the roof of that two-story house.
What is the scariest story you know that is 100% true? Before my dad died, he once told me a story from when he was in Vietnam in the 1960s. He told me about a mission where he and one other American with 5 SIG strikers, South Vietnamese villagers turned fighters, were tasked to emplace seismic ground sensors along a trail network deep in the jungle. He said they were about 2 days into the mission when he and 2 of the strikers split off from the main group to go watch a nearby trail intersection. He said the jungle was pretty quiet that day, just the sounds of birds and bugs and an occasional monkey. He said they had been watching the trail intersection for about 3 or 4 hours and were deciding on whether to move further down the trail or to turn back and link up with the rest of the patrol. Before leaving the cover of the brush, my dad said he checked the trail ahead of them one last time and prepared his men to move. Now here is where the story gets interesting, and he told this part with absolute dead seriousness. He said just as he started to step out onto the trail he sees a light-skinned black Union cavalry soldier in full battle gear laying alongside the trail just shy of the intersection. My dad said the Union soldier had 2 pistols, a Spencer rifle and a short curved club at his hip. As my dad was trying to process what he was seeing, the soldier looked directly at him and smiled. Then the soldier slowly placed a finger up to his lips as if to tell him to be silent and then motioned my dad back off the trail. My dad said he signaled for his men to remain hidden, and he recalled that as he slipped back into the jungle on one side of the trail, the Union soldier did the same on his side of the trail. Less than 10 seconds later he said the lead element of a group of NVA, North Vietnamese Army soldiers, walked right through the trail intersection some 30 feet away. My dad estimated that the group was comprised of some 70 to 80 soldiers equipped with automatic rifles, light machine guns and rocket-propelled grenade launchers. He has no doubt that his entire team would have been wiped out on the spot. He said as soon as the enemy soldiers had passed, he and his team beat feet out of there as fast and as quietly as they could and rejoined with the rest of the patrol. He reported the enemy soldiers his team had encountered, but decided not to say anything about the soldier he had seen. My dad kept this secret for many years, only telling me just before he passed and earlier only telling his grandmother on her deathbed in the 1970s. He said when he told his grandmother, she smiled and without opening her eyes told him, "You saw old Red Tom." Red Tom was my great-great-grandfather. He was a half-black/half Creek free man who was a scout for the Union Army during the Civil War and later served with the U.S. Cavalry in the American West. He was known for carrying 2 pistols, a Spencer rifle and a Creek war club into battle.
I found an old childhood photo. There's something wrong with it. I found it while cleaning out the closet. An old photo, creased at the corners. It depicted a little boy sitting on a chair in the middle of a wallpapered kitchen. Blue eyes, blonde hair. I flipped it over and checked the date on the back. November 14th, 1996. So me, when I was 4. Except, the kid didn't look quite like me. The photo was grainy, so it was hard to tell for sure. But the eyes were a little too wide set. The smile was too toothy. So, a friend? But it was my mom's kitchen. Floral wallpaper with pink rosettes, the old oak table. And the kid so closely resembled me. Wouldn't I remember having a friend that looked like he could be my twin brother? And why isn't it with the other family photos? I found it in Mom's closet. She had several photo books, all populated with childhood photos, documenting the most insignificant events, from baking cookies to baseball games. So why wasn't this photo with the rest? Why was it hiding on the top shelf of my mom's closet, tucked under a hat box? I walked out into the family room and grabbed the photo album labeled 1995 to 1998. Paged through it until I got to a good, clear photo of myself at 4. Then I pulled the photo from my pocket and compared the two. It wasn't a great comparison. My head was tilted to the side, and his was straight. I was wearing a hat, but he wasn't. Still, the difference was unmistakable. His grin was wider, toothier. His skin was paler. His eyes were wider set. Yet, the differences were subtle. To anyone but me, they probably looked like the same person. "What are you doing?" I turned to see my mom, standing in the doorway, carrying a large box. I hesitated, wondering if I should bring it up to her. She had enough on her mind, with my stepdad passing away and the big move. "I found this photo." "Who is that?" She set the box down and walked over. "That's you. When you were 4 or 5. She smiled. "Aw, how sweet. Look at you." "But it doesn't." I hesitated again, knowing I would sound crazy. "It doesn't, look exactly like me, does it?" "Yeah, you were a goofy-looking kid," she laughed. "You got a lot better looking as you aged." "No, I mean, that photo doesn't look like I did when I was a kid." "Look, see." I held up the photo of me in the Red Sox cap side by side with the photo of the boy in the kitchen. "I think they look identical," she said. "No, they don't. Maybe it's the hat." "Hey, can you help me in the attic? There's a lot of stuff up there." "Sure. I'll be there in a second." She smiled at me and turned away. I listened to her bare footsteps recede on the carpet. Then I snapped the photo album shut and put it back. I tucked the photo in my pocket. Then I walked back into my mom's room and opened the closet. There were more. When I took down the hat box to search under it, the top came off revealing an entire trove of photographs. I picked up a few of them and my heart dropped. A kid hunched over a birthday cake with 4 candles, smiling. Me. Except, not me. The same toothy grin, the same wide-set blue eyes. A kid standing in the front yard, pointing to a frog. My front yard. Again, not me. And then there was a photo that made my heart stop. A photo of my bed. I still remember those covers, with the sports cars on them. The pillow with the wheel on it. The car lamp. But there, sitting on the bed. Not one little boy. 2. Adam? My mom's voice came from above. I stared at the photo, frozen. Me. Sitting next to a little boy that looked almost exactly like me. A twin? A brother? I had no memory of this kid. All my life, I believed I was an only child. Adam. The stack of photos was a few inches thick. There was no way I could go through them all. I slipped several in my pocket, replaced the hat box, and then headed down the hall. "Coming, Mom." I started up the ladder. And my phone began to ring. The theme of Legend of Zelda played its tune. I stopped 2 stairs up and slipped the phone out of my pocket. Caller ID, Ali. My wife. "Yeah? Can you get me a drink, too?" Sure," I said. "What do you want me to pick up on the way back?" "The usual whiskey? On the way back?" "Yeah, on the way back from my mom's. I'll be here another hour or 2, but..." "You're at your mom's?" she asked. Her voice suddenly soft, confused. "Yeah, why?" "I don't understand." "I just let you inside the house," she said. "You're down in the kitchen. Making our drinks, aren't you?" The phone slipped from my hands. I stumbled down and snatched it up. My heart pounded in my ears. "Ali, that's not me. I think I have a twin. You need to lock the doors." "A twin? Adam, that's..." "Ali?" His voice. It sounded just like mine. Yet, there was something off about it, something I couldn't quite place. Like listening to a slightly out-of-tune piano. "Lock the door," I shouted into the phone. A heartbeat of silence. Then hurried footfalls as she ran over to the door. Click. "You locked it?" I asked, weakly. "I did." Her voice was trembling. I crumpled against the wall, relief flooding me. "I'm going to call the police, okay? But if you can get out the window, or something." "Adam." My mom shouted down from the attic. "Are you coming up, anytime this year?" "Just a second," I shouted back. "Okay," she said, skeptically. I pressed myself into the closet. Must filled my nose as I pulled the doors shut in front of me, pressing me in. "Ali? Are you still there? Are you okay?" I whispered. "I'm trying to get out the window," she whispered back. "It's a long drop, but..." Muffled knocking sounds, through the speakers. "Ali?" I heard him call. I shuddered. Hearing him say my wife's name made my skin crawl. I'm calling the police. Do anything you can to stay away from him. I disconnected the call and dialed the police. When I was assured they'd send someone over, I took a deep breath and opened the closet door. And froze. Mom was standing right outside. Whom were you talking to? She demanded. I stepped back, rustling against a row of sweaters. Fear swept through me, but then curiosity, anger, took over. I have a twin brother. Her eyes widened. Then her face crumpled, and she closed her eyes. I never. How did you? He's at my house. Right now. I pushed past her. He's with Ali? She clapped a hand over her mouth. That told me all I needed to know. You need to call the police, she called after me. I did, I shouted back, as I ran down the stairs. I pulled the phone out of my pocket and dialed Ollie's number again. 5 rings then went right to voicemail. I ran into the driveway. Yanked open the front door, dove inside. Mom got in the passenger seat. Mom. I know him better than anyone, she said, not looking at me. The engine rumbled to life underneath us. I screeched out onto the road. A few minutes of silence passed between us. Then she spoke. I did it for your safety. I scoffed. For my safety? Yeah, right. And now my wife is at the hands of a psychopath. I swung onto the highway, pushing my foot on the accelerator. Why did you do it? Why did you really tell me all my life that I was an only child? Because you are. Mom. I only gave birth to one little boy. She took in a shuddering breath, then let it out. He showed up on our doorstep one day. Nowhere to go. Your father, being religious and all, wanted to take him in. He said the poor little boy got lost in the woods, and it was our duty to care for him until his family was found. So we adopted him. That doesn't even make sense. Let me finish, she snapped, with sudden anger. We contacted the police, everyone, trying to locate his family. All our searches turned up empty. It was like he'd just popped out of thin air. In my peripheral vision, I could see her turn to me, her expression grim. And that day, we took him in. I swear he didn't look a thing like you. I don't understand. The change was so gradual, it was hard to notice. In the span of a year, his hair had gone from brown to blonde. His face had gone from gaunt and pointed to round and full. Whenever I brought it up with your dad, he was always belligerent about it. He's been playing in the sun a lot. He was so skinny when he got here. He's gained weight, of course, that's going to make his face look different. A drizzle started, flecking the windshield with bits of rain. I turned on the wipers, they squeaked against the glass. Then your dad started saying things that didn't make any sense. Like, one time I ordered a big meal at a restaurant. He laughed and said, "Are you eating for 3 again?" And he'd say here and there when you were pregnant with the twins. It was like he truly believed Alaric was our genetic son. With a shaking hand, I clicked on my turn signal and veered towards the exit. Why don't I remember him? Was there some sort of traumatic event, or? You still don't remember the day your father died, do you? No. He fell down the stairs, didn't he? I'd left you and Alaric with him while I went to the grocery store. When I came back, her voice cracked with emotion. You were crying. You didn't remember anything. Alaric, on the other hand, well, was acting like an angel, like he always did. But he had this smile on his face. She let out a breath. It was at that moment I knew that he had something to do with it. I put him up for adoption, and tried my best to erase him from our lives. Her words hung heavy in the silence. She pulled out her phone, tapped at it, then frowned. Ollie's still not picking up. Doesn't matter. We'll be there in a minute, I said, dread sinking in my gut. I swung onto our street. As the houses flashed by, my heart pounded faster. Ali, please be okay. The little blue colonial came into view, with the hydrangeas and 2 little garden gnomes. I pulled into the driveway and halted to a stop. Pushed open the doors and ran inside. Ali? I yelled. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Ali. I screamed. I raced up the stairs, Mom running behind me. Turned the corner. The door to our bedroom was wide open. No. Shards of glass littered the floor. A puddle of whiskey stained the carpet. The window was open, curtains fluttering in the breeze. But the room was empty. I work at a hotel. They gave me a strange set of rules to follow. When I started the night shift at the Evergreen Hotel, I found a piece of paper waiting for me. Written across the top in Sharpie were the words, "Rules for employment." What's this? I asked Amelia, who was packing up her things. Just the rules, she said, non-committally. Oh, like don't steal towels and stuff? She grimaced. Yeah, just stuff like that, she said nervously, pulling the bag over her shoulder. Hey, I got to run. Nice meeting you. See you in the morning, I said, with a wave. She grimaced again. Yeah, of course. Then she muttered under her breath something that weirdly sounded like, "If you're still here." What was that? She walked out the automatic doors and into the parking lot. If I'm still here? Of course, I'll still be here. My shift doesn't end until 7 a.m. What kind of slacker does she think I am? Shaking my head, I picked up the rules and began reading. You are allowed 1 free item from the snack bar per shift. Any further items will be charged out of your wages. Do not use the elevator between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. You may occasionally see a tall man standing in the lobby with a red suitcase. Do not make eye contact with him. Just check him into room 231 and send him on his way. If you hear someone crying for help in the pool area after midnight, return to your office and lock the door. Do not leave until sunrise. Do not enter room 404 under any circumstances. If any guests complain that the tap water is black, tar-like, or sticky, call the hotel owner immediately. You must ID every member of the cleaning crew in the morning. If anyone does not come up on the roster, do not let them in. We do not keep any Bibles in guest rooms. If a guest asks to use a Bible, we keep one in the back office that they can read in the lobby. Occasionally the computer may show vacancies on the 6th floor. Do not book anyone in these rooms. The Evergreen Hotel only has 5 floors. Do not eat the cookies. They are for guests only. Smile. Well, that was disappointing. When I interviewed to work at the Evergreen Hotel, they seemed like such a mature, stable bunch. Not the type to plan out an elaborate hazing of the new employees. Because that's clearly what this was. Amelia, or whoever printed this up, had decided to scare the crap out of new hires. What a cliche. Haunted hotel. Ha ha ha. At least now her muttered comment made sense. If you're still here, how many new hires had they scared off before finding me? Luckily for them, I was a horror movie buff and ex-military. I didn't scare easily. Just in case this prank got out of control, though, I saved the hotel owner's number to my cell phone, cursing my dyslexia a few times before I got it right. There were more rules, but I didn't read them. Instead, I walked into the lobby, poured myself a cold cup of coffee, and returned to the front desk. It would be an interesting night. Ding. The bell at the front desk rang. It was a little past 3. I was sitting in the back office, drinking another cup of coffee, playing StarCraft on my laptop. Technically I was supposed to be going over checkout logs, but I could do that later. Ding. Another impatient ring. With a sigh, I heaved myself up from my computer and made my way to the front desk. It was him. The man with the red suitcase. I averted my eyes, focusing on the desk in front of me. Don't make eye contact. Yeah, it was an immature hazing, but that didn't mean I was going to fail at it. I'm competitive by nature, and I was going to ace this thing. From what little I saw, the man seemed to be a tall, thin man dressed in a suit. Standing in the corner of the lobby, next to the grandfather clock. Probably one of Amelia's friends, or that employee Dominic who I'd briefly met earlier. Oh, of course. That's why I'm not allowed to make eye contact. I'd recognize him. I broke into a smile. That's actually really clever. I looked down at my computer, pulling up the check-in screen for room 213. When I looked back up, the man was standing right in front of me. I froze. How'd he get there so fast? I hadn't even heard footsteps. He was just suddenly there. My pulse started to race, but I took a deep breath in, steadying myself. Can I help you? He didn't reply, save for his fingernails rapping against the front desk. Tap 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 tap. This is getting creepy, really fast. I took in a deep, shuddering breath. No, that's what they want me to do. Get scared. They're probably watching all of this right now from the security cameras, laughing their butts off. Tap 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 tap. I glanced up again. My eyes fell on his suitcase. He'd left in the center of the lobby. And that's when I noticed, it wasn't actually a red suitcase. It was white. But there was so much blood or something that looked an awful lot like blood, soaking through the cloth, it appeared red. The substance dripped out onto the floor, welling in a puddle underneath the wheels. Just a stupid prank, I told myself. My eyes snapped back to the computer. I clicked on room 213. Fed the new hotel key into the reader. I plucked the key out and slid it across the desk. Without a word, he took the key. I didn't look up until the sound of his suitcase rolling across the linoleum disappeared. When I did, my blood ran cold. The floor was clean. There was only clean wood where the suitcase had stood and blood had pooled onto the floor in an inky mess. What the hell? As I stood there, thoughts racing through my mind, I heard it. The ding of the elevators down the hall and then, not 60 seconds later, a cacophony of sound. Racing thumps across the ceiling right above me. As if several people were running, as fast as they could. Ring the phone began to ring. Calls flooded in from rooms 202, 207, 218. What the hell is going on the second floor? That's when my eyes fell on the list, pushed aside and forgotten on the desk. Just check him into room 231 and send him on his way. Not room 213. Room 231. My dyslexia had made me read it wrong. I'd checked him into the wrong room. And I was starting to believe this wasn't just a dumb prank.
What's the most creepiest thing you've seen but that you weren't supposed to see? One morning I was waken up by someone using an angle grinder. I know it was my younger brother, he usually used that to cut stuff. Couple minutes later I heard a noise of liquid splashing only you hear in horror movies. I wasn't sure if it was a dream or not because I was half asleep. Seconds later my brother walked into my room holding his right hand with his other hand to not fell off his body, looked at me and told me to not let him die. I was in shock. I picked something, like a towel or I don't know what it was, and quickly put that around his arm and called 911, but I was so shocked I couldn't even talk for like a minute. I put myself together and told the operator what happened and waited for the ambulance. I don't know how long it took them to arrive, but all that time I sat there with my brother trying to keep him awake. I watched how slowly the light in his eyes faded. He passed out a few times. When the ambulance came I went out of the house to get some air while they did their stuff. First thing I saw was the angle grinder with the power cable cut off and a line of blood 2 meters long. There was no time for ambulance to get him to hospital fast enough, so they called a helicopter. My brother survived. He can move that arm and even carry stuff with it, but lost most of its dexterity, which sucks because he is right-handed. This happened 3 years ago. A few years ago I still lived in my parents' house. It was about 11 p.m. and our dog started barking viciously. The dog is only able to move around in the backyard, and normally he would bark at cats in the front yard, but something about his bark was different, so I walked to the window to see what was going on. I looked out and saw a man looking through the same window. We both froze, and after a few seconds he ran off. A few weeks later when we came home after work, all our electronics and expensive stuff was gone. On my way home, I was looking at a busy street from the subway platform I was on, and I saw this guy that everyone knew as a scammer in the neighborhood. He'd throw himself in front of cars for money. But that day he threw himself in front of a real nice car and it struck him real hard. He flew into the four-way intersection, clearly shocked by the pain, and his head got crushed under a truck passing by that didn't slow down in time. It looked like a watermelon exploding. It's crazy seeing a full-on human who has existed for decades just stop existing in a few seconds. Someone snaps their fingers outside my window every night at 3 a.m. The neighbors warned me not to look at him. I heard it my first night in the new house. Someone walking down the street and snapping their fingers with both hands in the middle of the night. Shit. I had forgotten to close my curtains. Earlier that day, an older couple came over with a saran-wrapped plate of muffins and a warning. They told me that every night at 3 a.m., someone walks outside the house and snaps his fingers. They said that I should never, under any circumstances, look at the man. If I did, I would sorely regret it. When I asked them what happened if you looked at him, they didn't say a word. Instead, they just looked at each other, and the husband shook his head. Now I was in my room and the snapping man was on his way. I was just about to get out of bed and shut the curtains when suddenly the next snap came from right outside the bedroom window. I let out a startled cry. The house was a good 20 feet from the public sidewalk and separated by a garden gate and then a row of bushes. Somehow he had cleared the distance in less than a second. I covered my face with the pillow and curled up into a ball. A whispered prayer escaped my lips, and I hoped that God was stronger than whatever was outside. The thing started walking back and forth, going just past my house each time. His snapping started out slow and rhythmic but got faster and faster each time until it reached a feverish speed. As they sped up, the snaps grew louder, much louder than any sound a human snap could make, to the point that they rattled the window glass in its pain and drowned out every other sound. I began to shake, and shouted for Jesus to protect me. Part of me wanted desperately to jump out of bed and face whatever monster was outside, but I thought back to my neighbor's visit and resisted the urge. It wasn't even their warning that persuaded me, it was the look on their faces when I asked what happened to those who chose to look. They both turned white as ghosts, like the blood had been drained from their heads, and their faces twisted in nauseating fear at the memory of neighbors who hadn't heeded their warnings. It was the kind of instant animal reaction that you cannot hide even when you try, so I knew that whatever happened to those who looked, it had to be terrifying. Even so, it was difficult to lie there defenseless in bed while the snaps grew so loud that I thought my eardrums might burst. I tried stuffing the corners of my pillow down my ears but it did nothing to quiet the incessant roar. Then there was silence. The noise stopped so suddenly that it was almost startling. From outside, a gravely reptilian voice said, not in a whisper but in a low and quiet tone. Good night. Footsteps went away from the window and back up the road in the direction they came. It wasn't until the footsteps trailed off that I noticed the sound of someone crying. After a moment, I realized it was me. I was crying, no, sobbing uncontrollably. The experience had been absolutely terrible and frightening in a way I cannot put into words. The worst part was that the louder the snaps got, the more I wanted to look at who was doing them. It wasn't just a morbid curiosity, it was almost as if the sound was beckoning me, like an audible angler fish was inviting me into its razor-filled jaws. I got up without opening my eyes and shut the window curtains. It took 4 more hours to fall asleep, and even then only because the sun was starting to rise and the world felt safe again. After a while I developed certain strategies for coping with my nightly visitor. At first I tried putting earplugs in before going to bed, but that didn't do anything to cover up the sound of the snapping. Worse still, the goodbye at the end was always as clear as if I had my ear up against the wall. I asked around, and some people in the neighborhood let me know that you could help drown out the noise by leaving a fan on through the night. It sounded dumb at first, but I was desperate enough to try anything at that point and, sure enough, it worked. The snapping was still loud, but endurable, and after a week I was sleeping through the whole thing. In order to make sure I never accidentally looked out the window, I tied the curtains shut and put a box over the sill for an added layer of protection. I also constructed a wall of cardboard around the corner of my bed closest to the window so that if I happened to look over there in the middle of the night and the box had in some way fallen off and the curtains were somehow open, I still wouldn't see him. I even put tripwire in front of the window so that if I were to try and unblock the window in my sleep I would fall over and wake up. I know, it's a lot of precautionary stuff, but what would you do in my situation? I was determined to not be like one of those dumbasses in scary movies who know there's an imminent threat and just keeps going about things as usual, and when the monster gets them everyone in the audience thinks I told you so. Fuck that. Once I fine-tuned my nighttime defense strategies, my life started getting back to normal. I joined a book club, settled into my new job, and even became friends with a couple coworkers. One was a goofy guy named Tyler who's stupid in a fun to be around kind of way, and the other was a beautiful girl I was flirting with named Amanda. Everything was going great until I had the dumb idea to invite both of them over for a little party at my place. We started off with board games, pizza, and beer, then more beer, then some pizza, and finally some more beer. At one point Tyler got up to use the pisser as he put it, and I seized the opportunity to capitalize on the liquid courage I had in my system and make a move on Amanda. I was just building up to it when Tyler shouted out, "Have you ever experienced something creepy that you just can't explain?" When I was around 20, a few years ago, I kept having dreams about a woman with long black hair named Aurora. They were different dreams, but for some reason her distinct face and name always ended up in them. It got to the point where I would wake up frustrated and confused, trying to Google her name or find out how I was connected to her. After a few months she stopped showing up and I dismissed it, thinking my brain was just being a nuisance. Fast forward a few years later. It was Halloween 2009, I'm in the car with a friend. We are stopped at a gas station. I'm about to pull out and merge onto a highway when I get a phone call from a random number, so I stop the car but no one answers. There was a person behind me who grew impatient, honked at me, and then swerved in front of me instead of waiting for 2 seconds for me to move. The second they get on the highway, a silver Honda Civic loses control of their wheel and crashes into the car that swerved in front of me. I called the cops and waited at the gas station for them to come. Turns out the drivers of both cars died. It 100% would have been me if I hadn't gotten that phone call. Called it back a few hours later out of gratitude and curiosity, rang 3 times and went to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Aurora, please leave your name and number." Chills ran down my spine, and I got goosebumps like I've never had before in my life. Called it again the next day, because I was so confused about the whole situation. Some woman answers, we get to talking, I tell her my entire story including the dreams I had. She tells me she doesn't know how I got her number and that she never called me as far as she remembers. Weird. Ask her if she has a Facebook to confirm if she is in fact the woman in my dreams. Check her Facebook. It's her, the woman from my dreams.
Who is the creepiest man you've ever met? A week before my 10th birthday, I walked to the corner store with a $5 bill and picked up a jar of ragu for my mom. On my way home, a man I'd never seen before fell in step with me and began talking. "Hi," he said, cheerfully. "My name is Dr. Ramsey. I'm a pediatrician. Do you know what a pediatrician is?" I walked along silently, not replying and fervently hoping he would take that as a sign he should leave me alone. Subtleties were not his strong suit, though, because he kept right on chattering. "Are your parents looking for a pediatrician for you? Of course, you're almost a big girl now, you'll be needing another kind of doctor soon, won't you? That's okay though. They can still bring you to me until then. What's your name? You have beautiful hair." I was just on my way to get some suckers for the candy jar in my office. "Do you like suckers?" Thankfully, we were nearing my house, so I ran forward, up the back steps, and through the kitchen door. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of a very long, very scary ordeal. It didn't take long after that for Dr. Ramsey to begin showing up. At first, it seemed benign enough, at least to a kid. He would drive by nearly every day, smiling and waving. I told my mom, who said maybe it was on his way home from work. But then, the phone calls began. One day my dad called me into the living room and sat me down. He asked about the day Dr. Ramsey followed me home, and if I talked to him. He said I wasn't in trouble, but that I needed to tell him the truth. I told him no, and he asked if I was sure. I told him no again, and he frowned, then asked, "Then how does he know your name?" I didn't know. It turns out, that was not all he knew. He knew my sister's name as well. Pretty soon, neither my sister nor I were allowed to answer the phone. He called several times a day. At first, neither of us knew what he was saying. Then, one night, one of my brothers told us that he was telling my parents that he was going to hurt me. My dad had called the police, but as this was before there were any stalking laws, there was not a lot they could do. They told my parents to call back if he tried anything. My dad then called a friend of his from back in the day, who happened to be a cop. For the next month, my dad's friend escorted me to and from school. Suddenly, life as I knew it came screeching to a halt. I couldn't walk to school alone, I couldn't play outside, I couldn't walk to 7-Eleven. Then one afternoon my sister, 2 of my brothers, my mom, and I were in the kitchen. One of my brothers saw a glimpse of someone in the garage. Dr. Ramsey came bolting out of the garage, my brothers chasing after him. They ran all the way to Cherokee Park, where he lost them in the trees. My parents called the police again, but nothing came of it. The only information they had was a description and a name that was almost certainly fake. A couple of weeks later, we woke to find our dog hanging from the side porch. She was a gorgeous saddleback German Shepherd, born the same day I was. We were all devastated. The cops said there was no evidence it was him, and ruled it accidental, but none of us believed that. His phone calls became more informative in the meantime. He would talk about who was home, and who wasn't. If my brother would say my dad was home, he would tell him who was really in the house. He also would talk about the house itself, about the window in the kitchen he could easily open with a knife from the outside even when it was locked, and about the French doors that connected the living room to the side porch and how the lock could be opened from the outside if you jiggled it just right. That night, my dad put in some carpenter nails at the bottom of the French doors until he could get a new lock ordered. My parents had to go to a company event for my dad's work. My older brothers were at the roller skating rink. My sister was on the phone with her best friend. My little brother was on the floor asleep. I was watching Devo on the midnight special with Wolfman Jack. It was late. Suddenly, the top of the French door swung inward, and in the few milliseconds, before the nails in the bottom caused them to snap back, I could see his silhouette. My sister whipped the phone at the television, and we ran up the stairs. About halfway up, we realized our little brother was still asleep on the living room floor. As quietly as we could, we slipped back down the stairs to get him. We all went into our bedroom and didn't turn on the light, this way we could see outside. We watched out the window for a while, and when we didn't find him, we crept down the hall to our brother's room to look. We looked down and could see someone standing at the back door. He knocked, loudly. "What do you want?" My sister asked out the window. He stepped back and said, "Is this the Mercy residence? I have a pizza for delivery. Can you come to the door?" She scoffed at him, declaring she was not stupid, she could see he didn't have a pizza, and she was calling the cops. He left. A short while later, my brothers returned home. We told them what happened and they walked around the yard, watching for him. They came back in, and things settled down. By now we'd pretty much given up calling the cops because it never helped, so we just went back in, each of us carrying a knife from the kitchen just in case. Eventually, one of my brothers went into the kitchen to get a bowl of cereal as a snack. He kept looking around the kitchen, through the doorway into the dining room, and at the windows. He didn't see anything, but he could feel his eyes on him, so he went closer to the door to try to see better. The kitchen lights were reflecting on the windows of the door so he still couldn't see. He stepped closer, then closer again, until he was right up to the door, then cupped his hands on either side of his head so he could see. There on the other side of the window pane was Dr. Ramsey, smiling back at him. He turned to yell for my older brothers, and when he looked back again, he was gone. They went out again to look for him but didn't see him. A couple of weeks later, I was at school and we were outside on the playground during recess. I was swinging upside down when I saw that now familiar blue Ford Galaxy cruising by, moving slowly. There he was, smiling and waving. He called my name, and I ran to the teacher and told her. The school had been told all about him. She took me inside right away and called my mom. That same day my mom had gotten a call from the school office asking her to verify that my dad was picking me up, as he'd called to say he was on his way. He wasn't. Not long after that, I woke up one night, thirsty. I went down to the kitchen for a drink and there, sitting alone in the dark, was my dad. On the table, a gun. He was tired of the police waiting until Dr. Ramsey tried something, he was tired of his children being terrorized, and he was tired of being afraid every time he left for work that something would happen to us while he was gone. I sat with him for a time, watching, before he sent me back to bed. These events, and many more, took place over a period of around 18 months. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. He had vanished from our lives, the phone calls, the drive-by with the creepy waves, everything. For a long time, during and after the Dr. Ramsey days, I would have a recurring nightmare in which I would wake up to find him standing over me as I slept. It took a long time before I felt like a kid again. I don't know what happened to him when he disappeared. I don't know if he was in a car wreck, locked in prison, or in a coma. But sometimes I wonder if the wait ended for my dad when he was sitting in the darkened kitchen one night. I don't know, and I'm not sure I want to.
Dark web users of Reddit. What was the most fucked up thing you saw on the DW? A friend of mine showed me some things on the dark web one day a few years ago. Some things were a little disturbing, but other things were kind of amusing. There was a man in a mask who claimed to be a hitman and would murder someone for $50,000. But you had to send him it in a cryptocurrency. There was another place where you could buy all sorts of drugs and have them delivered to your house. That was definitely a trap. My favorite thing I saw was a man who said he was selling baked goods like muffins and cakes. He was literally selling baked goods. It was innocent and hilarious. I spent a lot of time on it a few years back. Weapons, drugs, hitmen, and, surprisingly, many libraries filled with many interesting books to download. Most fucked up was a page that claimed to be selling young women and children. The guy even had several to choose from, and I think he listed the ages and genders of a few of them. Never investigated further though. Have tried to find it again, with no success.
Emergency alert. Please be advised, this is not a drill. As of 12:34 a.m. EST, there has been a nationwide security breach. All citizens must stay in their homes, avoid all windows, and keep all entrances securely locked. Do not, under any circumstances, answer your door. If you hear the voices of known individuals, disregard them. They are not what they seem. Stay tuned for further updates. I stared at the notification on my phone. Nationwide security breach? Was this some kind of prank? But emergency alerts weren't exactly known for their humor. I switched on the TV just in time for the emergency broadcast to fill the screen. The same warning echoed from the speakers, the announcer's voice straining with restrained panic. I'm not much for freaking out. You could say I have a cool head. But damn, this was eerie. I went to lock the doors, drew the blinds, and gathered some essential supplies to hunker down in my windowless home office. Just as I was setting up camp, I heard a knock at the door, and my phone buzzed with another message. Emergency alert. This is a follow-up advisory. The nationwide security breach involves unidentified entities impersonating familiar individuals. Do not interact with these entities. They have shown aggressive and potentially deadly behavior. Keep your phones charged, stay away from windows, and stay in your rooms. I heard another knock at the door. Amazon, the voice spoke. I got up from the couch, only to realize the parallel of the situation. The nation is on lockdown, you know. I'm not supposed to open my door. There was a moment of silence. He completely ignored my statement. You need to sign off this package. I told him to leave it on the porch. You need to sign off this package. Something, my gut feeling, told me that this wasn't right. I did have a package I was waiting on, but the way the man spoke, the way he ignored my remarks about the lockdown. I was curious to take a look at this man, so I peered my eye through the peephole. I almost jumped back at the look of him. He was unbelievably close to the eye hole, and his expression was blank but soulless. They had covered the entire field of view from the outside. At that point, I didn't think, but I knew something wasn't right. I no longer answered the remarks of that person, that thing, whatever it was. I barricaded the door with the closest furniture I could find. The valet table. I pushed it towards the door, hearing the jangling and fall of the keys that we kept on it. The knocking was getting more repetitive and louder. It was occasionally interrupted by the same, monotone voice. You need to sign off this package. There was no anger in the voice, but the volume of the voice increased the more he said it. It got louder, 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 until it stopped. I jolted from my position from around the corner, but slowly approached the peephole. In just a matter of seconds, they were gone. Out of thin air. I didn't see anybody walking off the porch, or on the sidewalk. This was turning into some Twilight Zone episode. I couldn't help but wonder, was this happening everywhere? I shot a message to a buddy of mine in London. To my surprise, he responded almost immediately, confirming he'd received a similar warning. Just then, I heard a soft tap on the front door. Hey, it's me, Jake, called a voice that I recognized as my neighbor's. The dude I usually borrow a beer with on weekends. But the alert's warning was clear. Sorry, Jake, I said loudly enough to be heard. I can't open the door. Soon, more voices came. Voices of friends, family, ex-girlfriends I hadn't spoken to in years. Each voice was perfectly mimicked, their pleads becoming increasingly desperate. I tried to look through the peephole, but I saw nothing. It was darkness. Amid the growing chaos outside, my phone buzzed again. Emergency alert. Unidentified entities are not contained. Do not, under any circumstances, leave your secure location. Any attempt to use transportation or communication devices besides the emergency alert system may attract their attention. The situation is currently being handled. Stay inside. Stay safe. Well, there goes my plan to call Mom. Sitting alone in my makeshift fortress, I could only wait. The phantom voices continued for hours, then days. The occasional scream in the distance made my blood run cold. Anarchy outside my door, and all I could do was sit tight. The days blurred into weeks. Every so often, a new alert would ping, each one grimmer than the last. The entities were everywhere, impersonating everyone. I began to feel like the last man on Earth. My only tether to reality, the relentless emergency alerts. Finally, after weeks of this madness, a new alert chimed. Emergency alert. The nationwide security breach has been contained. It is safe to leave your home. Please report any unusual activities to your local authorities. Do not approach any individual displaying unusual behavior. We are stronger together. As the alert ended, a profound silence filled my house. The voices were gone, replaced by an unsettling quiet. I cautiously unlocked the door and stepped outside. My neighborhood was unrecognizable, houses were abandoned, some were just empty plots. That is until I saw what was seemingly the first sign of life that I had seen in a very long time. A familiar car approached my house. It parked in the driveway, and in a panic, I shut the door, locking it, my knuckles clenching white. Until I realized where that car was from. It was my wife. Honey, it's me. I was so caught up with my hostile interactions at the door, that I must have forgotten about her. How could I do that? How did my brain amidst adrenaline forget about the love of my life? I looked through the peephole. There she was, beautiful as ever. Her brown hair, those welcoming hazel eyes. She had a relieved, but exhausted expression as she gently knocked on the door. She was just as I had remembered her. But I remained calm. Honey, where have you been? I had to stay at a nearby friend's house. I was out getting groceries. Remember? As foolish as I felt, I remembered that. She was right. I was too scared to open the door though. Even though the announcement said it was all over, I felt that the announcement was sent out under the influence of a third party. The same third party that was behind this madness. Honey, please, I promise you it's all over. Besides, it's getting cold. I had a gut feeling this wasn't right. But it was my wife. My beloved, beautiful wife. I'd spent the last 8 years with her, and this is how I'm supposed to treat her? Have I become delirious after spending these countless days on house arrest? The cold breeze from the outside covered my face, but that was all I was greeted by. Nobody was there. My wife, the one I haven't seen in months, was gone. I stepped outside just a few steps to look for her, but there was no sign. No car in the driveway, no footprints on the lawn. She was gone. As the cool breeze continued to blow, chilling my face, I turned back to go inside. But before I could reach the handle, the door abruptly swung shut. The unmistakable sound of the lock clicking into place echoed through the eerie silence. Confusion washed over me, followed by a rising sense of panic. My home, my only sanctuary, was now locked, with me on the outside. I pounded on the door, my fists making dull thuds against the heavy oak. And then, a shadow fell across the peephole from the other side. I took a step back, my heart hammering in my chest. Slowly, the door creaked open just a crack, and I saw her. My wife, or at least something that looked like her. But her face. Her face was blank, a smooth expanse of skin without features. I felt the world spin around me as I stumbled backwards. My phone buzzed in my pocket, its vibration jolting me back into reality. We both looked down at our phones. Emergency alert. Disregard the previous message. The entities have further infiltrated the emergency alert system. Trust no one. Especially those you know. I looked up from my phone, my breath hitching in my throat. The door was now fully open, and the faceless version of my wife was standing there, her phone in her hand. She was looking at it, the glow from the screen casting an eerie light on her blank face. I felt a deep sense of dread coursing through me. She then raised her faceless head, slowly shutting the door. I was told to investigate a family disappearance in Disneyland, and I've been horrified ever since. I work in security at Disneyland, and I considered it to be the happiest place on earth. But now, I think this may be it for me with this job. I just can't see myself working here any longer now. 3 days ago I got a call from management. Apparently a couple of days before that, housekeeping had went into a room that should have been turned over that day. Turned over is when one guest leaves by about 11 a.m. and the next guest checks in around 3 p.m. And all of the guests' items were still in the room. Housekeeping made a note of it and moved on, but during the next 2 days when they entered the room, everything was still there and untouched. I went to check it out and sure enough there was an empty room full of luggage, clothes, snacks, some toys, everything a family would need for vacation. The manager had already looked up the previous reservation and it was for a family, dad, mom, 2 little kids. I tried to call the phone numbers they had given but all I got was voicemail. We were a bit stumped so I made the call that the housekeeper could clean the room and take the family's personal items to be held until we got in contact with someone. I went digging into the reservation more. The family had arrived 5 days before housekeeping discovered all of their stuff. I found that the family had paid a parking fee and their vehicle description was listed. A quick walk of the parking lots and I had easily located their vehicle. So that ruled out a car accident or them deciding to just leave all their stuff behind. Next, I saw that they had bought a dining plan. This is when a guest prepays for all of their food. They're given a certain number of credits to use for meals. This family had only used 3 credits and the last one was 2 days after they checked in. It appeared that the day they arrived, they got here late and probably just stayed on the resort. The next day they used 2 credits at Epcot. The second park day they used just 1 credit at Magic Kingdom and it was at breakfast time. Now at Disney we have something called Magic Bands. Magic Bands are worn by the guests and act as a room key, park ticket, credit card, dining reservation payment, fast pass, a system used to bypass lines, and more. It took some work, but I was finally able to look up this family's fast pass history. The day they went to Magic Kingdom, they had breakfast at a restaurant in the park, rode a couple of rides, and then rode their last ride. It's a small world around 11 a.m. then nothing. Finally, it was time to bring in someone else on this. I called an old coworker at Magic Kingdom and asked him to pull security footage for It's a Small World at the time they rode it and I made my way over there. When I got there, my friend was very confused, almost distraught, looking. He showed me what he found. There's usually a camera in the direction of where rides load and unload. The footage showed them scanning their bands to use fast passes for the ride and boarding the ride. The footage from the exit of the ride just showed the other people in their car exiting. They weren't there. Of course we thought the worst. Maybe one of the kids had fallen out and mom and dad and the other kid got off in the middle of the ride to help and they all got injured or killed or stuck in machinery somewhere. So we shut down the ride. Middle of the damn day. Turned off that earworm music and turned up the lights. Me and my buddy walked that ride 3 times before we called in help. Eventually there was close to 10 cast members searching, and we didn't find anything except for 3 cell phones and a hat. I was right stumped. I've kept digging the past couple of days, and I'm not sure who to tell what I found next to. I've called the police and I suppose they're on the way, but the company has a way of covering up things like this and I decided I can't live with myself if I don't put out some type of warning. I kept digging into their reservation over the last couple of days and today I noticed they had purchased a memory maker. There are photographers all over the parks and cameras in a lot of the rides and, with a memory maker, the photos are all free. They automatically get added to a guest's Disney account when the system knows their picture has been taken. And the system always knows. Everyone's whereabouts are always known with the magic bands. Well, I opened up their memory maker photo album and, I swear, there's 732 pictures. The first 30 or so are pretty normal. Epcot, a few rides, in front of the castle. But the rest are all in It's a Small World. The rides only take 1 picture per go around. So it appears as though this family has ridden this ride over 700 times. The first picture was pretty normal. Everyone looked happy. It was a busy day and a full car of guests. The next one is rough to look at. The car is empty except for this little family and they look so darn confused. The next 10 to 15 I can see dad getting angry, yelling. Mom is holding onto those 2 kids like her life depends on it and you can see the kids getting increasingly upset, crying. And it goes on, and on, and on. After 50 or so it looks like they're trying to get out. In one the dad is missing. In another they're all gone. Maybe they bailed early in the ride and tried to walk out, but in the very next one, they're all right back in that damn car. After around 450 or so, I only see the mom and kids. It's just when I look closely I can see dad, maybe just his body now, slumped down in one of the other seats. Since about 675, there's just a mom and one kid. Another body in another seat. The mom and kid aren't moving anymore. I think those two are still alive, just damn near catatonic. Looking straight ahead, pale. After scanning and analyzing the photos, I began to notice a difference in the background. Something was different. The dolls were moving. In some of these pictures I can tell they aren't where they should be. I even saw one with a doll in the car with his family. I can't look anymore or I'm going to lose my lunch. I closed the album. Its file size has increased since I closed it. God, were there new pictures being added? I see on security cameras that the local PD just arrived, so they'll take over soon. I wish I knew what the hell is going on, but I also wish this damn thing had never landed in my lap. After I talk to the police, I think I'm going to walk out of here and never come back. I just wanted to get this out there, before Disney feeds the media some dumb cover-up as to why a whole family vanished. They didn't vanish. I know where they are.